Okay, for this second tutorial, we're going to take a look at the application builder part of Baserow, which lets you build custom applications that connect with your database and provide a web-based front end to more specifically deal with data in your database. So for the first example here, I've built a little to-do list. You can see I've got this hosted and available a little subdomain of the server that I have Baserow installed on. It's a to-do list, so I can add items. So I clean the floor, and that item will get added to the list. And if we need to edit any item, so for example, if we want to change what it says, mark it as completed, we can do that, and now those changes have been saved. And also if I want to delete, I can delete that. So very simple application, but one that will let us talk about how to do all the basic create, read, update, and delete, the CRUD functionality that you need to be able to interact with the database, and also how to use the application builder to get started writing applications. Okay, so I've got that already here in a workspace. In my workspace, it's called To-Do Tutorials, and you can see I've actually got a number of them installed here. We're going to go through each of them. I've got some different variations with some additional features. But we're going to rebuild and follow the same pattern we did in the last tutorial. I'm going to just teach you how to rebuild this application. So what I'm going to do is keep two tabs open, and I'm going to go to my workspace here, and we're going to create a new workspace just like we did in the last tutorial. Let's create a new workspace called Tutorial 2 To Do. Okay, I'll add that. Currently it's empty, there's nothing in that workspace. And we're going to just kind of go back and forth between the existing application. I'm going to show you how to rebuild it from the ground up. First thing we need to do is add a database. We'll call that database to do. And if we go in our existing databases over here in this workspace, you can see I have a database called to do. I didn't even rename this, just had the initial default table. We'll take a look at that here. And you can see it's just consists of two columns, one called item, which stores text, and one called completed, which stores a Boolean value, a true or false value. I'm going to copy these values here, and we'll just go and rename our default column header here to items. Keep that as single line text. I'll go ahead and Control V and paste those values that we had there. Let's get rid of this notes field, and instead of an active field, we want to call that completed. So we'll edit this field, take this default Boolean one and call it completed as the title header, the header of that column. And let's see here, copy what we've got already, add to it. Good. Okay, so now we have a table that stores to-do items. And for now, that's all we need. Just a little database to store that information in a couple tables. Now, next thing we need to do, you're going to see along with these databases, which is all we've looked at so far, now we've got some applications in this workspace. I'm going to bring this up. You can see I've got several different applications. I've actually got a couple different databases, one called To-Do and another one called To-Do 2. Then these applications are called To-Do List, and then To-Do List 2, and To-Do List Auth. I'm going to deal with this To-Do list, and there are 2 pages in this application. So each of the applications has a web page layout, which is an interface that users can look at and interact with if there's any sort of features to interact with the database. And you can see I can add things to this page and edit the items that are on that page, and basically just add items top to bottom. And you can, within those items, you can create columns. So let's just take a quick look at how this builder works, and then we'll use it to rebuild the application. So what I'm going to do here is go down the bottom. So I can add new tables to the databases, and I can add new databases if I'd like. But here we're going to choose application. And we'll call this application to do. Okay, now this brings up the builder. And you can see here I've got some default text. Let's just get rid of all these things. You can either click the delete key or just delete. So each application will have this default set of layout widgets. And there's also a page called examples, which I'm just going to delete. So these are default pages. And let's take a look at how I had these things named. So I had this named as to-do list, and the application was called to-do. Let's go ahead and do that. Again, you can rename anything you want in your workspace. So we'll call the application to-do list, and this page will be called to-do. Okay, so easy to edit. And let's take a look at what we have over on the existing application. We've got a little bit of text. We've got a grid, and we've got a little form. So the way this works is we've already got some default text there. You can see over here I can change. This is actually not just text, it's a header. We can change the size, the heading size, 1 through 6, and we'll adjust this. Let's see what we put here. Copied exactly. To-do list was the text that's displayed there. So to-do list. Oh, great. So now I've got a little bit of header for that page. And the way you add other components is to click a plus here, or you can go up in elements, see the elements that are on the page, and add another. I'm just going to use this plus here. It's a little bit simpler and faster. And you can choose to add an element above or below. I'm going to add an element below this. And just to play around a little bit here, I'm going to add a few things. I'm going to keep adding some items here. So I can add, for example, an image. I can add some text. I could add, for example, a rating. And you could see all these things are selectable and adjustable. And here, for example, this rating could have 10-star selectors in it. And you can choose the type, the style that you want displayed there. So I'm going to delete that element. I don't want that on the page. There is a text element here. So whatever we type here is going to appear on the page. And importantly, this text field element supports Markdown, which is a very simple way to style and format text. So I can, for example, change the sizing, and I can do things like bold and italicized text. So it's a very simple way you can learn how to do Markdown in really just a few minutes. So you see I have some text over here now. It appears bold and appears highlighted. We can add lists. So for example, so on here, let's add a list. Put some items here like this. Just put a dash, and you can get a list. So all sorts of great things you can do to just format text without having to use HTML. It's very simple to do, and this is great for just laying out basic text on a web page in your web app. Okay, so we're going to delete that for now. We don't need it. Let's do some other things here. We can, for example, upload a file. Let's say we want to include an image of this soft soap on our page. Upload it, and blam, now it's on our page. And very importantly, for all these elements, we have a style tab. So you can include, call it background. You can choose, really importantly, the width that it appears on page. And you can choose to have borders and margins and corner radiuses. And in addition to the style components, let's go ahead and make this medium, and we'll also make our to-do list medium width. Okay, in addition to the style, we have these theme overrides. So for example, if we want to center that image within its area, we can do that. Choose the width and the height, and so on. We can make a radius. Let's make that 20 pixel radius, and if we did actually have a border, you would see that border would be rounded around the corners. So you can work with images, and very importantly, we can let's add some columns here. So to arrange items on a page, you can go down here, and I typically start by including a container on any page that allows you to move entire groups of things around and make changes to entire groups a little more simply. So I'll typically put a container on a page, and you can have as many containers as you want. You can slide them around as you need. And then within that container, you can add other containers. And one of the most important of those containers is a column container. So that lets you put things side by side on a page. And these columns are automatically responsive. So if you're looking at this on a big screen, you can see up here you get different views. On a big screen, they will be next to each other. For example, on an iPad screen, they will appear a little differently, so they fit the screen better. And on a phone, you'll see they will arrange themselves vertically. So they're automatically responsive, and you can see how things look by clicking these icons up here to switch from desktop to tablet to phone view. Okay, so we want this, I just want to have, for example, 2 columns here. And let's say, for example, we want to have, we'll put an image again here. You could point it to a URL, but instead we will just upload an image here, and have it have some text next to it describing it, and I will switch this to Markdown, and I'll say this is with 1 pound symbol. You get a little bit of a header. 2 pound symbols is a little bit smaller. And this is a great mop, and then and you can continue to just add text as you want in a normal font, and add anything else. You can just look up Markdown with Google, and you can see how to use that. It's very quick to learn. So, and then if you need to delete one or more of those items, you can do so. And we're going to delete this whole column. That column layout is going to be super helpful in getting us to be able to move things around on a page. Okay, so another one of the very important things you can do here is deal with data. So if you want to interact with the data in a Baserow database, you have to add it as a source. So we're going to get, for example, several rows from our local Baserow, and we'll just call this list some rows. And it'll create this data source, and we'll choose which database we want to use. Let's see what I've done here. Why I do not have a data source yet. Because it looks like, honestly, it looks like I may have unintentionally deleted that to-do database. I probably clicked on it, but not a problem. Click on restore, and I've got the to-do database back. I can check it and look at it and see that it's got the same data we had before. That little trash feature is absolutely fantastic. It's hard to make a mistake that you can't get away from in Baserow. Okay, so I'm going back to my application, my to-do application, my to-do page in the application, and I'm going to go back to editing this data source, and now I'm going to use the to-do database. I'm going to use this table that's called table. I haven't created a view. There's a default grid there. The benefit of choosing a view is that, again, if you remember from the first tutorial, we can apply filters and sorts and groupings. So if we use those particular views, those sorted, filtered rows of data will be the ones that appear on the web page, that we can use on the web page. So we don't have any of those here, and we can additionally, just like when we had a view that we prepared for a site, we can additionally filter that data here. So if we want to say, if completed is true, selected, then we will only see those rows. And you can edit these data sources as you need. So I'm going to get rid of that filter, save it. So now we have this thing called list some rows. That's a data source for this page. And if we want to share it with other pages, we can just go here and say share between pages. Now that data source will be available on all the web pages in your application. So we have an application with pages here. Okay, so let's just take a look at how you can use that data source. We'll add a component that lets us deal with that. So, for example, most common thing you'll do is add a table. And the table view now has a variety of features here. So we want to choose our data source, which we've created, called list some rows. And you can see right here in the editor, it populates it with the actual data that's going to appear in the application. So done. You can choose the number of items per page, and if you go past that, you'll get a little button that says more, show more items. By default, you can choose what you want that label to say. Okay, and you can see we have two fields that were populated from the data source. We can populate those again, refresh them if we think something's changed. And one of them is items, it's the items column, and one of them is the completed column. If I click on the items column, you can see we can adjust this. Let's just call this item. We want that to be a text item. And we want that data source to be our data source in the column called items. So that looks good. We'll leave that the way it is. And now we have a completed column that's going to appear in this data UI component. And it's called completed. We could edit that as we need, choose the type we want to display, and choose the source for the value that's displayed in each row in that column. And that's what we want. We want the completed. And very importantly here, when we click on this, you can see any place where we can edit a value. We can put in, let's just edit this, we could put in we'll delete this, and we'll say, blah, 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 is what the value should be. Now, of course, that's not going to work in a checkbox, so let's just set that to true. And you can see all of those have been set to true now. So let's go back, and we want that actually to be from our data source, and we want it to be the completed column. So you can see that's what was there before. Let's go back up to our data source and items here, and again, we could put in some values. If I just type a static value, that's going to appear on every row. So this little data selector is very, very important. We want to get our items here. And so for each row, it's pulling out a row from our data source in the items column and putting it in each of the rows of this grid. I'm going to show another way we can show data on a page. It's very important. This is the basics of what we want to have happen here for displaying data. You can also choose from some options. You can do vertical, which is more like a card view. But if we want to actually have a card view, the other things you're going to see used a lot, it's a common part of any sort of web application builder, is to have a repeat view. Let me show you that again. I'm going to add, I could add it up here, or I could add it in the bottom. So let's just add it right in here. I'm going to put in a repeat view. It's a container. And what we want to do is choose a data source. Use that same data source. And inside this repeat, we can have anything we want. So we could put some text, and we could just have that be some static text, blah, 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 blah. You can see all of the rows that are in the database, we're going to see that static text. So it might be something like a header. We could say to do item, and then what we could do is pick the items. So to do item, pay the rent. To do item, go grocery shopping. To do, read that book. And so really importantly, you can combine data sources with static values. And of course I can make that markdown if I wanted, and adjust if I wanted to make that all bigger. I can use some markdown to do that. Okay, so this little view can let us add additional items. So let's say now we want to include a checkbox. Go down here, I'm going to get a checkbox, and we want to set that data value to the completed value. So now, to do item, pay the rent, and we've got a checkbox. And to do item, go grocery shopping, and we've got another checkbox. And they're filled with each of those completed values, the value in the completed column from each of the rows in that database table. So this is how we're going to build different views. And one of the really useful little features here is if we're working on something inside a container, you can click this little button where it says select parent, and now I can grab that whole parent container, which is not each item in the card that we're displaying, the repeated card view, but the entire container. And let's do some more things here. I want to make that a horizontal so they're next to each other, and I want to have 3 rows displayed when I'm looking on a computer screen, 2 when I'm looking on a tablet, and only 1 when I'm looking on a small device like a phone. And now if we go up and look at our views, this is the desktop view, there is the tablet view, and here is the phone view, the small screen view. So you can see now they're automatically arranged in a way that looks appropriate for the right size screen. So these are some good defaults. We can change the spacing, for example, put a certain number of pixels in between, and of course we have all the styling. So if we want to change the styling there so that we're just using, for example, a medium size, we'll do the same thing here. We'll make this medium size, but even easier if we have a container. Remember, all these things are in a container, so I can see what I've got here. I actually may have removed that container initially, which is fine for now. But typically, one of the nice things about putting all these items, so instead of having to click through each of the items individually on the page and say, okay, I want the width of that also to be medium, if I just stick all these in a container initially, I can make that container medium, and they will all be sized to that medium size. So it's one of the real benefits of just using a container. You can move things around the screen and make bulk adjustments to the way they appear on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this to-do list, this little to-do list set of cards, and go back to our grid. And I'm going to go ahead and preview this. This is what the page looks like in my browser right now. When I open up this application, I see a to-do list sitting on a web page. I could send that URL out to somebody and they could see it. And I can also publish this. So one of the great things about Baserow is it really takes care of all of the normal project management requirements and tasks that are involved in building web applications. One of those is to handle the networking for domains and subdomains. So we'll call this like to-do tutorial at my site here. This is hosted on compute.com, 101compute.com. And it will create that. I publish this, blam, I can go there, and now I've got a site which actually is a working live site, and it contains that application. I can share that, and all that work is done automatically by Baserow. Many of these things that involve project management and workspaces are really big time-consuming tasks when you're doing this sort of work without the help of a no-code builder. So it's phenomenally simple to use. To-do tutorial.101compute.com. I'll leave that up so you can see the actual results. Okay, so now we've got a to-do list, but we want to be able to, we can read this. We want to be able to do create, read, update, and delete. There's no way to update this, so what I'm going to do is add an additional column here. So when we created this, when we added this table to the page, it automatically populated the columns that were in our data source, but we can add more. I'm going to add another column here. I'm going to change that name of that column. I'm just going to put dash there, and I don't want that to be text. I want to have a link where I can edit that particular row. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to get a value here, I'm just going to have some static text. So on each row it says edit, and that's a link that I can click. Now, when I click that link, I want to go somewhere. I either can go to a page that's in the application, or I can go to a page somewhere else. If, for example, I put in an external application, let's publish this and I'll show you what it does. When you click on any of those edit links, that would just go to this site. Refresh this. It's taking a moment to create the new page. So if I click on edit, that's going to push me toward my compute.com site. And I didn't put in HTTPS, so let's do that one more time. My actual website. And it's going to open in the same tab, or I could have it open in a new tab. So these are just features of the builder you should be aware. Let's look at this site now as it exists. If I click on this, it's going to open another tab, and there is a website that opens up. This is one of my websites. But we don't want that to be static. What we actually want that to do is we want to open another page that will allow us to edit the values in this particular row on the grid. So I'm going to change that back to same tab. I'm going to change this from being a static value to being a not a custom, but a page. I don't want it to go to to-do. We want this to go to a separate page. So what I'm going to do is go back to my application here, and I'm going to create a new page. I'll call this page edit. And one of the hardest things to get if you've never done application before is to understand how you can send values or parameters to a separate page. So you're going to pass some values around. In this case, we're going to pass the ID of the row that we're editing. The way you do that here is you put a little / a colon, word ID, and we're going to send a numeric value, which is going to be the ID of the row that we're editing. Don't worry, you're going to see this over and over and over again in the tutorials, but this little bit right here is probably the hardest thing you have to learn how to do in Baserow. Understanding that when you're editing anything and you want to send values between pages or pass information between pages, you're going to do it by adding these path parameters or by adding query string parameters. So again, what we're doing here is when we click edit on our grid, we want it to open up this new page that we're calling edit, and we want to pass to that page the value of the ID. So we're making up a name here, calling it ID, and we're going to say we're going to pass some numeric information. Okay, so that created a new page. You can see over here in our to-do list application, we've got a to-do page and an edit page. So now I can switch between my old to-do page there and my new edit page layout. And let's look at what we've got in our application here. Just a few things on this page. We have a button here. We have a little bit of a form next, and that form has a text entry field and a checkbox and a submit button. So let's start duplicating that a little bit. I'm going to add an element here. The first thing I had was a button, and that said something like delete, permanently delete, delete this to-do item, something like that. We can change the style here. I think what I'd like to do is make the width normal, and go back to my general tab, and I'm going to make that full width so it takes up the full width. I'm also going to center the text on that button. Okay, now back here we've set some styling, we've set some general properties, and then we want to set an event. So when this button is clicked, when there's an event, any interaction that the user takes or any situation that causes the application to have to do something, we can respond to that event. So the event that can happen with this button is it can be clicked. So on click, there's nothing set right now, we're going to add an action. And what we want to do, for example, say we wanted to set a just a simple example here. If we just want that to show the notification hello world, we could do that. Let's publish this. And actually, we're not going to be able to see the site here because I haven't created any navigation yet. So what I'm going to do instead is preview it. So I just go right to this page. We can see how it looks. If I click on this button, the response to that action is we get a little hello world pop-up. But I don't want it to say hello world. What I want it to do instead is I want, for this particular row where we're deleting, I want to delete a row in the database. And I want it to be from our local base row. I want it to be from the to-do table, from our table name table. And the row ID is going to be the row ID that we passed as a parameter that we called ID, that numerical number that we passed to this page as ID. And I can select that here. And it knows, because we've created these page settings, that when this page is opened, it's going to be passed an ID. We can then use that ID in our actions here. Okay, so again, when this button gets clicked, the action we've selected is for it to delete a row, choosing our database and table, and the row ID that will get deleted is the ID that gets passed to this page when we click the edit button. So now we actually have a working application. We do not have a way to get there, but you can see I can change this and actually change the number of the row, that ID number, and we'll see the layout actually change if any values use that number. We can preview that. You can see here, if I click to delete this, it's going to delete the fourth item. And now it's done it, but right now, I get an invalid form now because that row has been deleted. If I go back into my to-do database, look at the table, the thing that was the fourth row is gone. I'm going to go in my trash and actually look here and restore that row. So I can do that as an administrator. It's back now. But that deletion was handled by the interaction with the UI, with the user interface, the application that we're building. Okay, so we need to do a couple more things now. We need to be able to get to that page. So we also need to do a couple more things here, at least one more thing. When I do that delete row, it didn't give me any feedback saying, for example, the row has been deleted. So I'm going to add another action down here. So when the on-click event happens, we have one action, which is to delete the row. We're going to add another action, which is just to show a notification. We could have it go back to the page. Let's do this first and just say row deleted. Okay. Now, if I run this here, now we're going to get this thing that says row deleted. Now, if I do this again, it's going to give me an error because that row no longer exists. So let's go back into our application. I'm going to look in my database. Lo and behold, you can see the first row has been deleted. I'm going to go into my trash for this workspace and restore that row. So you have all of the features of the database available in your workspace, all the tools that you have in your workspace, and that interacts with the features you're building in your application. Okay, so let's change that. I think it may even be better instead of just back to events here for this button. Instead of just two events, giving a notification, let's also go back to the home page. So we're going to open page. The page we're going to open will be the to-do page. We're going to open it in the same tab. So now, when we delete an item, it'll pop up a little notification saying it's been deleted. And we want to get really interesting. Here we could do this. Instead of just having some static text, let's do this. Boom. So we'll say deleted that number. Okay, and that will actually actually give us a dynamic title for the notification. So now we're doing all these things. We have, you can see we have 3 actions related to this onClick event. We're deleting the row, we're showing a notification saying that we deleted that row, and then we're going back to the to-do page. Okay, so we've got the delete. We can now create in our application builder, our database builder in Baserow. We can create our table, we can read the table in our interface, and we can delete. So we have one more thing to do. We need to be able to update. So here we have this edit. What we're going to do here now is for that column, what we're going to do is, since we've got a link, we can choose where we're going to navigate, and we want to change that from to do to edit. And you can see this is going to send an ID. And the ID that we want is the ID for the row. So in this data source, we've got an ID that's built in by default. When you look at your database, you can see it creates a unique ID for every single row, and those numbers never get reused. So this ID refers to one particular row. In this case, it's going to be the row of the table that edit is contained in. So now, what this is going to do is navigate to the edit page, and it's going to pass that ID value to that page, so we can use that ID value to do some other things. So far, we've deleted. The other thing we want to do is we want to add a form. So I'm below that delete button, I'm going to add a form. And let's go down here, and we will add a form. And in that form, we want to, let's take a look and see. So we want to include a text item, and we want to include a checkbox so that we can edit the item value and we can edit the completed value, the true-false completed value. So let's go ahead and edit. And actually, no, we don't want a text value. What we want is a data input field, which will let us edit the text value. So we'll call that, entitle that item. So we have a field there we're going to be able to type into, which has the label item. We don't want to have any default values or placeholders there. That doesn't need to be required. And we can do some validation here. If we want to, for example, make sure that it's an email or a number. And we can also set that to a multi-line field if we want, and change the number of lines. But we don't want that to be multi-line. And it doesn't need to be a password, which would put asterisks instead of characters so that people can't see what's being typed in. We just want that to be a text type. Okay, so we need, on this form, you can see here, this is included in the form, we want to add another element. We want to add a checkbox. So here's a checkbox. And we're going to say this is, label this completed. And we actually do want a default here. We want the default value to be the data source, and in fact, we want to probably share the data source from our to-do page. So let's go back there. I'm going to make this data source shared between pages. Now when I go to my edit page, I've got a data source here now. If we look on that page, same data source that's been shared between pages. And we want these default values to be from the data source, the completed value. So we're going to our data source, going to the list some rows data data source, and then checking the completed value. And if you look here, if I change the index here, we're going to get different values. And do the same thing for item. So let's make our value, list some rows, and we'll get the items value there. So you can see now when we're on page 1, oh, I actually don't want the first one. What I want is to get the particular value. You can see it's getting all of the rows there. I don't want that. I want just a particular row. So let me go back here in our original application. I'm going to show you how we did that here. So we used a different data source, and that's why I have that little error. I'm doing this raw and just building in place so you can see the kind of workflow you go through generally building an application. So I'm going to add a different data source here, new data source. And what I want is not all of the rows. I want just a single row. Leave that named as it is. And I'm going to select my to-do. Most of these things are just point and click. You don't really even need to know what you're, know offhand. But here, very importantly, in this new data source, it wants a particular row ID. You could type that in static, or you could use the parameter which is sent to this page. So that little parameter that we pass to this page is the fundamental building block that we use to access data between pages in the application builder. You're going to see that used over and over and over again, and it'll become very familiar. Right now, just keep in mind, every time you need some sort of dynamic data, you're generally going to be choosing some sort of value that's been passed to the page. In this case, the ID value that we've passed. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do for this is, instead of choosing the data source where I list many rows, let's get rid of that. I'm going to choose the data source where I get a single row, and I'm only going to get that one particular item this time. And for this, again, I'm going to get rid of this data source and use the single row data source. And for that little checkbox, I'm going to use the completed value, the value from the completed column in the data source. Okay, so now we have a form where we can edit and view a single item. We can delete that item. We've already taken care of that. But we're not doing anything with the saved item yet. What we need to do is click on the submit and go to the events again, add an action. And for our action here, what we want to do is update a row. And we're going to use our local database to do from the table. And again, we get to choose an ID of the row that's going to be updated. We're going to use the parameter that's been passed to the page, so the ID value. And here, we get to choose in that data source what we want to update the new item to be. And in this case, we want to use the form data for item that's displayed on our page to update the item column in the database. And we want to use the completed checkbox to update the completed column in the database. So again, you're going to see this over and over and over and over again, but it's very, very simple to do once you get used to this. This is the hardest part of learning to use the builder, and it will become really simple really quickly. I am adding a new action now after we've updated the database. I am going to, I could show a notification, but what I really want to do is just go back, navigate to my to-do page, and see those changes updated in the grid. Okay, so let's take a look at this and publish it, see if we've got any errors. Look at this site, to-do tutorial.101compute.com, and we can edit. We can permanent delete an item. Good, that works. Shows us that we deleted row 1. We can also go back and let's edit walk the dog. We'll say that's completed. And let's say we want to walk the dogs. Let's submit that. And there we go. We've got a working delete and update portion. So we can, out of the CRUD facilities, create, read, update, and delete. We can read the database with this grid. We can update the rows in the database. We can delete rows in the database. We can't create any new ones yet. So let's finish this up. While we're doing this, I'm going to go back into my little database here. I'm going to go back in the trash. I'm going to restore that thing that I deleted. You have complete control as the administrator of this database to handle the database as you need. And the application interface builder gives only the features, the layout, the display of the data in the database, and access to those values, including authenticated access that we'll get to in a minute, to users so they can only deal with the database in the way that you want them to. And so you can include it on pages of a website in ways that you want them to appear. So we have these two pages in our to-do list application. I'm going to go back to the to-do page, and what we're going to do is add a button down here. Let's add this button. Let's style it a little bit. Let's put it, so we'll give the width medium so it matches the rest, and let's go ahead and change some of these theme overrides. We're going to center it, and let's go back here and make the button text create new to do. And let's see what we did in the original application. I see what I did here. So I had another form, and I had a instead of create new to do. Let me just show you one way we could do this. We have a button here. When that button is clicked, we could go add action, and when that action happens, we want to create a row. So again, we select our data source, table we want to use, and we can see the rows or the columns in that database. And we don't have to put any new item. We can just create a new row, and when we're done, let's just refresh the data source. We're going to refresh this data source with some rows, and let's go ahead and publish that. You'll see what's going to happen is we're going to create a row, but it's not going to have any values in it, which really is fine because we can then click on that row and edit. So let's create a new to-do, and see if that actually worked. Yep, it worked. And from there we can edit that row and make some changes to that row, and we can edit that row and delete that row. So we do have a fully working CRUD system, but I want to sort of build this up. So I'm going to take this item out. What we're going to do is look at our original application here. I'm going to go over to our other tab, kind of look at what we've got here. So you can see I added a form. It's got a text entry field and a submit button. And for this, I've got a couple actions. We're going to create row and do the same thing, but here we're going to, for the new row, we're going to set the item to the form data, whatever is that in that field, and then we're going to refresh the data source. So let's do that here. We'll reconstruct that. The whole point is to reconstruct this app. So here I'm going to add a form, and in that form I'm going to put in a data input field. Let's say new to do item. We don't need a default value, but let's make that required. We don't need a multi-line. Let's do a little styling here and make that the same width as everything else. Same thing here. I'm going to make this submit button. Go to the center. What I'm going to do here is look at the text of the submit button. Let's center that. If I wanted to make it full width, I could. But let's set that to auto. So now I got a nice submit button, and we will make the text of that create new to do item. Might usually just put something like add new. Okay, so now the event for that button is going to be create a row, select our database table, and in the items field we want in this new row to insert form data. And we don't want to insert anything in the completed row, so we're just going to disable that field. And then when the new row is created, we're going to add another action, where that's where we're going to refresh our data source and refresh this data source. We should be good to go. So let's try this. Use site. This is our live site. We are getting our new item created, and it is being edited properly. There we go. I'll clean this up a little bit, but we've got more to do here. So I'm going to end the video right now, and we're going to come back and talk about how to add authenticated interaction access to this application, so that only particular users can have access to the editing features. So we'll do that next. This might be a little bit long of a video already, so I'll clean this application up, finish it up, post the results, show you the changes, and then we'll look at authentication, which is sort of the next big step of being able to control the data that's being put into your database and edited in your database with the web application. So for now, I think that's enough that you can understand how to use the application builder, create layouts on the screen, and begin working with data in the database. We're just going to do more and more and more of that until it becomes second nature, and you know how to access the information you need and work with IDs and values in different ways on the screen. And we're going to look a lot more at styling, so we create applications that look a little nicer. So I'll end there, and we'll pick up from there in the next tutorial.